Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this visually charming open world adventure game doesn't look like it would be difficult to run, but despite the Breath of the Wild-esque art style here, Ubisoft's Immortals Fenyx Rising is actually built on the same Anvil Next engine that powers Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so it was no surprise when I saw that the minimum system requirements, while very informative, are a bit scary, especially if you've got hardware that sits closer to the lower end of things here. So I've been playing through the demo today, which offers a snippet of the full game and therefore gives us an ideal look at just how well, or not very well, this will run. Demos are great not just for a taste of gameplay but also for a performance preview. After all, buying a game only to find that your system can't handle it isn't a nice feeling. So let's investigate. If we throw up some minimum spec info again, and focus of course on the very low settings column, it seems as though we shouldn't expect much more than 30 FPS at 720p. But is this the case? Well, I've gone for what I feel are the weaker of the two components mentioned here, the i5-2400 and the GTX 660, along with 8 gigs of RAM of course. I was pleased to see that despite what it stated, the game actually ran at 30 FPS with 1080p resolution and the very low settings, and to be fair it still looks pretty good. In games like this with a unique art style, you'll often find that the visuals don't differ too much between very low and high, or if that isn't the case, low settings will still look good. It's what I always say about games like The Outer Worlds as well. The unique visuals mean that it looks good even with the graphical options reduced. During moments of combat, the game hovers around 30 FPS but doesn't drop much below it, though there will be some spikes to the high 20s. I saw 29 a couple of times, and in another moment the game dropped to 27, but these occasions were brief. Interestingly, during combat intensive scenes, the graphics card takes the brunt, yet when moving away from the fighting and just exploring the open world, the i5-2400 doesn't hesitate to ramp up to 100% usage, though despite this the frame rate does tend to exceed 40 or 45, which is nice to see. I think Ubisoft have been extra cautious with their spec recommendations to an extent, but this is of course much more appreciated than an underestimation. The game would certainly benefit from a hyper-threaded CPU though. 30 FPS at 1080p is perfectly doable at very low with these specs then. Next up, I turned the preset up to low, and I didn't expect to see such a performance hit, if I'm honest. While there were moments of 30 FPS gameplay, there were far more drops into the 20s, and not just the higher end of the 20s either. Sticking to very low is your best bet for 30 FPS on this hardware then. But what if you want 60 FPS? What sacrifices do we have to make in order to hit 60 FPS with this game? Well, that's where Ubisoft's original 720p suggestion comes in. There are a couple of options here though. Immortals Fenyx Rising has a resolution scale slider built in, so the first way to improve frame rate, and the method I would personally use, would be turning this down to around 70%, which is the equivalent of 1344 by 756. This is going to just about give you 60 FPS on average, though there will be moments where this goes up and over 70, and of course moments whereby 40 FPS isn't to be unexpected. This does put more of a strain on the i5 as well, which maxed out at 100% more often, and this is the reason why the 660, which you'd think might do better, isn't doing better. Though it's far from being a decent performer here and will still cause issues of course. In fact, a lot of the time it will be maxed out at 99 to 100% usage, and of course with the 2 gigs of VRAM as well, that doesn't help. Now the other option you have here is of course the good old-fashioned native resolution approach. Dropping the game to 720p will yield an ever so slightly higher average, and although the CPU usage does like to touch on 100% a lot of the time again here, the 1.1% lows will be ever so slightly improved over the resolution scaling option, though to be honest it's negligible and what I'd call within a margin of error. Now this game has surprised me in a couple of ways today. The first is that I'm actually really enjoying it. I noticed it a couple of weeks ago, and I sort of brushed it aside. I thought, yeah, maybe I'll play it later, but now that I've actually started it, well, it's pretty good, and I'd recommend it, to be honest. Now, the second surprise is that it's more demanding than you think it's going to be, though this is understandable considering the tech that it's using, and what's more, it's still less demanding than Ubisoft themselves actually stated, which is a bonus, and that doesn't really happen often. So there we go. Immortals Fenyx Rising on the minimum specs. It runs at 30 FPS with 1080p resolution, and it still looks pretty good. For those of you wanting to target 60 frames per second, of course, well, a drop in either native resolution or adjusting the resolution scale slider will be your best bet. All that's left to say is then, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Now, a few people have asked me to do this for this game, so I thought, why not? I've got Ubisoft Plus, is it called? The monthly subscription thing, so I thought, yeah, we may as well give this a go. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like on it down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I hope this helps any of you out who are looking to play this game and aren't sure. Give the demo a go, because you'll find out soon enough whether your hardware can handle it or not. Thank you for watching then, and I'll see you all in the next one.